Hello, class. We're going to continue lesson 14, the Civil Rights Movement. This is the second part of the lesson. Sadly, we are starting with a very horrific and tragic event during the Civil Rights Movement, the massacre of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. Four young girls, Denise McNair, Cynthia Wesley, Carol Robinson, and Addie Mae Collins, were attending Sunday school at the 16th Street Baptist Church when a bomb was thrown into their Sunday school class window and exploded at the 16th Street Baptist Church, a very popular location for civil rights meetings during the era. Riots erupted in Birmingham, leading to the deaths of two more African Americans. The coverage of the events changed the attitudes of many nonviolent protesters. For example, the fourth chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Stokely Carmichael. Here we have the victims of the 16th Street church bombing: Addie Mae Collins, Carol Robertson, Cynthia Wesley, and Denise McNair. The struggle for voting rights. The 24th Amendment was passed in January of 1964 by President Lyndon B. Johnson. The amendment abolished the poll tax, which originally had been instituted in 11 southern states after Reconstruction to make it more difficult for poor whites and African Americans to vote. The Council of Federated Organizations, the COFO, a network of civil rights groups that included CORE, Congress on Racial Equality, and SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, launched a massive effort to register black voters during what became known as the Freedom Summer. It also sent delegates to the Democratic National Convention to protest and attempt to unseat all the white Mississippi contingent. Lyndon B. Johnson and civil rights. President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which was sparked by the 1965 Selma to Montgomery march that was led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Both laws were part of Johnson's Great Society program in the United States, which he declared a war on poverty. This was the most sweeping civil rights legislation since Reconstruction. The Civil Rights Act prohibited discrimination of all kinds based on race, color, religion, or national origin. The law also provided the federal government with the powers to enforce desegregation, an ultimate end to Jim Crow laws that had existed for decades. It will further lead to more civil rights acts that will be passed during the Johnson administration. So, the civil rights legislation in a nutshell: Civil Rights Act of 1964. The act prohibited discrimination based on race, religion, national origin, and gender. It also desegregated all public accommodations. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 outlawed literacy tests that were required for people to take to register to vote. Federal registrars were sent to the South to register voters. SNCC, CORE, the NAACP, the list goes on and on. The act resulted in an increase in African American voters. And then, as I previously mentioned, additional civil rights acts were passed, like Johnson passing the Civil Rights Act of 1968, prohibiting discrimination in the sale, rental, and financing of housing. Here we have the Voting Rights Act of 1965 being signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson, and you can see behind him Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The death of Malcolm X. On February 21st, 1965, in Harlem, New York, Malcolm X, black nationalist and founder of the Organization of Afro-American Unity, was shot to death. It was believed that the assassins or assailants were members of the Black Muslim faith, which Malcolm had recently abandoned in favor of Orthodox Islam after his pilgrimage to Mecca. His death remains shrouded in mystery to this day. Here we have civil rights leader Malcolm X. The March from Selma to Montgomery. On March 7th, 1965, African Americans led a march to Montgomery in support of voting rights, but were stopped at the Paytas Bridge by a police blockade. 50 marchers were hospitalized after police used tear gas, whips, and clubs against them. The incident was dubbed Bloody Sunday by the media. The march is considered the catalyst for pushing through the Voting Rights Act 5 months later. Here we have the March for Voting Rights. Riots, executive orders, and the Black Panther Party. Race riots erupted in black neighborhoods all over the country as a result of the civil rights movement, but one of the most famous was in the neighborhood of Watts in Los Angeles, California in August of 1965. Other major riots occurred during the summers of 65, 66, 67, and 68 in cities like Detroit, Newark, and Washington, D.C. Lyndon B. Johnson issued Executive Order 11246, which enforced affirmative action for the first time. It required government contractors to take affirmative action toward prospective minority employees in all aspects of hiring and employment, and later education. The militant Black Panther Party was founded by Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale in Oakland, California, 1966 to 1982, to combat violence against African Americans in their community, but to also provide for meals and education for the children in the community. Here we have the symbol of the Black Panther Party. The assassination of Dr. King and Bobby Kennedy in 1968. In the first days of April of 1968, Dr. King headed to Memphis, Tennessee to support African American sanitation workers who were on strike due to racial inequality. On April 4th, 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., at the age of 39, was shot and killed as he stood on the balcony outside his hotel room in Memphis, Tennessee. Escaped convict and committed racist James Earl Ray was the lone gunman and convicted of the crime. Presidential candidate Bobby Kennedy, who had committed his campaign to the civil rights movement, was shot and killed on June 8, 1968, in Los Angeles while campaigning. His assassin was a Palestinian immigrant named Sirhan Sirhan. Here we have the assassination of Dr. King and the assassination of Bobby Kennedy. Key Supreme Court cases. On June 12, 1967, the Supreme Court ruled in Loving v. Virginia that prohibiting interracial marriage was unconstitutional, which allowed for interracial marriage not only in Virginia, but nationwide. 16 states that banned interracial marriage at the time were forced to revise their laws. In Swan v. Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education, Supreme Court upheld busing as a legitimate means for achieving integration of public schools. And in the case Regents of the University of California versus Bakke was the 1978 Supreme Court case that ruled in a closely divided decision that race could be one of the factors considered in choosing a diverse student body in university admissions decisions. All right. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. Thank you so much for your time.